Welcome to At His Feet podcast for the day. We are grateful that we have another opportunity to have this conversation. And our today's conversation is actually on the existence of God. You know, we both have a burden to explain how reality is shaped. This we will do today by looking at the both sides, both the theism and atheism. If we must do that, we must do it with respect to each other and only allow facts to be the judgment standard, not the tone, the sound, and or aggression. The reason we are here is to have a sober discussion on God's existence with an aim to help our viewers to appreciate the biblical position that God exists outside of space, time, and matter in relation to the alternative reasoning against the same. And to help us have this discussion today, we have an amazing panel of 3 brothers and 1 sister. Maybe, Jared, I want to bring you on board, and I want us to pick it from this perspective of, let's just settle at the point that we don't know.
Okay.
That is what Maurice is saying. And I really like you are demystifying, only, basing our arguments on scientific evidence and giving us alternative. I think you are satisfied with the other. If not, we are coming back to you. But now this bit of, let's settle at we don't know. What would you say about that?
It's not true. We know. We know God exists, but I wanted to, before I even come to that, we just add something on the issue of science as maybe as a guide to spiritual truth. Number one, science in itself, and I'm not belittling science, it's very good. People should research and go more into science. But science itself is ever changing. When I went to school, and maybe this you can use it to gauge my age. When I went to school, and in Form 1, in the chemistry class, we were told an atom is the smallest element,
Element of matter.
Element of matter. I was in Form 1. Before I left that same school, the same teachers came back and told us, okay, we are wrong. Actually, it's not an atom. Now, it has been a while since I was in a chemistry class. Who knows what other scientific truths, which were truths then, been changed. So when I wrote in my exam that an atom is the smallest element of matter, I got a tick. In Form 2 or Form 3, if I wrote the same thing, it will be wrong.
You got around.
That's the beauty of science. Yeah.
It's ever changing. So if you use it only as the ultimate guide to leading us to truth, it will not guide us because it's ever changing. And number 2, the fact that you don't understand something, and or even there's no evidence for it, does not mean that that thing cannot be right or is not right. For instance, we have our mobile phones. You take your mobile phone, you type in a message, and somehow you press some key, and that message comes out of your phone, goes through the clouds or the trees, doesn't get stuck in somewhere. It goes to Huisero and gets into my mom's phone. I don't know, and I'm sure you don't know how that works, but you cannot doubt that thing is true. Or M-Pesa, you kill some things here, and you believe I've showed you a message that I've sent you money. No notes have moved from my phone to you, and you cannot explain how it worked. Maybe for M-Pesa, it was just a message. So science is good, but it cannot be the ultimate guide to revealing to us the truth of God. Now, and then finally, just still on this, you claim that you do not agree with the existence of the Abrahamic gods, or the God presented in the Bible and the Quran. Well, I'm not a Muslim, and the Muslims are not here to speak for themselves. But you don't agree with the God presented in the Bible, or the God of Abraham, right? But I'm sure you believe in that, in Abraham.
As a person?
As a person, that he lived.
No, I don't think so.
You don't even think Abraham lived?
Their characters, I think, live. People like Jesus, I would give it. People like Paul, but I think Old Testament characters.
They are
There's no way
fictitious.
Moses could have written and wrote a book, and in that book write about his death.
Right
So,
about his death.
yeah.
Okay, so but we were saying there are some characters in the Old Testament because Jesus himself is also an Old Testament character. He's not a New Testament character. The New Testament writes about Jesus who has already happened. They did not write about Jesus while he was still alive. The Bible authors, so technically, where the New Testament begins, it's post-Jesus. So if you are to classify Jesus, we'll put him in the Old Testament.
As a prophecy, there was a prophecy about his.
Oh, there are lots of numerous prophecies about the coming of Jesus. But Jesus himself, technically, is an Old Testament prophet. Do you believe in him?
No, I don't believe in him. As a person, I think there's more evidence. Actually, most atheists think he doesn't exist, but I think there's more contemporary evidence for
That
him. Not as of course, not the supernatural aspect of him, but I think there was a Jewish rabbi
Called Jesus
that people attribute to that.
Do you think, and you also think there was a Jewish rabbi called, or a Jewish leader or prophet called Abraham?
No, I think that one did not exist. I think that one.
Not even Moses.
No, Moses we are sure he did not. Yeah. Paul, we are sure he did, because we have extra biblical evidence that he actually exists.
Okay.
So Moses exists.
Moses doesn't exist. I'm
Doesn't
saying
exist,
most
okay.
New Testament characters actually exist because there is extra biblical evidence.
Very
Okay.
good. So, and then I'll give others a chance. Just one more quick statement. So the Old Testament characters, you as an atheist, did any one of them exist?
With that one, I would say, of course, because you see, stories are told are based on reality. Like if I write today, probably a political story, I will include Ruto or Raila here. So definitely the people who wrote those, most of the character, they were based, probably the character they had known or people who are like heroes in those stories. So I wouldn't hedge much more on the fact that they did not exist. I would probably dispute their supernatural claim about them, but I wouldn't make a claim either way that they exist or not.
So according to you, you don't know whether the Old Testament characters existed or not.
Yeah, I'm agnostic. But
Okay.
the supernatural
That's still
character
okay. That's still
aspect,
okay.
no.
That's still okay. What about the New Testament characters?
Paul existed. Paul, we have stories. Jesus also from people like Scotus
Josephus.
and Josephus.
Josephus.
So yeah, that one you can say he existed
Okay.
as a person, as a human being.
What about somebody called Zacchaeus?
The one who was
Tax collector. Yeah, I know
That's very
that.
political.
But did he exist?
I don't know. I don't have evidence for existence also. I don't know.
So actually, when I look at your position, almost everything you don't know.
Yeah, but that should be the default position because otherwise you risk knowing things that you don't know.
and actually, that is what I wanted us to discuss.
Okay.
At that point of we don't know. You know, what's our response? What's your response on let's settle at we do not know? Lindsay, you want to come in and then I bring in back.
Yeah. Oh. So still on the existence of God, you've said that there are characters in the Bible like Paul, and there's another question that I'd like to throw at you. Like, if you believe that there was Paul, and Paul was talking about God, so are you still convinced that for real, whoever Paul was talking about did not exist, or those were also stories that were made from the Bible?
Leave alone Paul. I have you guys here. You're talking about.
And you don't believe us.
No, see, I'm referring to this because you talked about Paul. Actually, you're the one who brought Paul up.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, well,
Didn't
so
even know
if
Paul.
you know Paul,
No,
meaning that you know Paul, this is someone you know. That's why you talked about him. You can't talk about someone you don't know.
No, I know the Bible. I was on my way to be a pastor like you. So, I was headed to Harvard Bible
At
College.
that time, did you know God, or did you think God existed?
I believed in God. I was brought up as a Christian.
So at that point, you knew God existed.
No, I did not. I believed God existed. You see, and this is actually a very important question that we also need to. Most people, do they think through to become a Christian? Because you see, like for you to join, let's say, a political party like ODM, you are going to look at the manifesto. You agree with this, you like this one I don't like it, then you choose it. Do you think people make that conscious choice? Like, I am not a Christian now. Let me now choose to be a Christian. I think most people, because by the virtue of they are brought up in a Christian setup or even Muslim in a Muslim
That's a
setup,
very good question. I would want the theologians here to answer it so that you don't answer for them. Do you think
Do I think?
that people make conscious decisions?
or it's by default because your parents take you to Sunday
Yes.
school, they take you to Nini. You didn't even have a time to consider Islam or Hinduism. By default,
You are convincing her.
Let me.
Yes, and then I'll bring in the man.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me, there's that part called morality. And that morality, even let's say when you're 2 years old and you'll go trying to get sugar, maybe from the sugar dish, then your mom will tell you, no, don't do that. Then you automatically would go back, check if she's there, go back, get the sugar, take it, go hide. So I think there's something inborn. It tells us like, this is wrong, this is good. So there's morality. And in morality, I can say that through the existence, I support that God exists. And that is why there's morality.
But that would be supporting existence of God of Islam as well, God of Hinduism, because they are considered their moral givers. It wouldn't specifically tell you that's a Christian God, right?
Very good. Actually, we'll get to that argument on morality and how that is going to play around here. So Mark.
Yes, I was going to answer on the question of skepticism.
Yes.
The idea that we don't know.
Yes, yes.
And again, this is partly where I want to agree with Maurice, that it is fair to, in many things, and as human beings, there are many things we don't know, isn't it? Yeah, there are many things we come to learn. But then we have to be careful. We don't go into what is called hyperskepticism. And this is the idea where you reject everything purely because you think you don't know anything. You know?
What would be the alternative to that?
So I think, and this is where the Bible even invites us, God even invites us to come and reason with him, isn't it?
Exactly.
That there's a healthy kind of skepticism where you're coming with an open mind to say, okay, maybe I am not quite sure on this thing, okay? But given experiences or evidence or things that happen, that I can actually come to believe. Now, I want to throw in a spanner here and say that God has not left us at the mercy of evidence for us to believe. You know that? In fact, it would be a very difficult and hard thing. Imagine if what you needed to do for you to believe is be born, do your studies, you study, you become a theology professor. When you are 75 years is when you realize, kumbe there is a God. Then you believe. You see what I mean? God has not left us at the mercy of evidence. But people tend to belittle these other kinds of experiences because they don't think they are very good evidences. But these kinds of beliefs are called properly basic. Let me give you an example. Say you have a headache. Here we are seated in this panel. What evidence would you give us that you have a headache?
Only his experience.
It is your experience, isn't it? Now, that is called a properly basic belief. Even if you have no evidence that you can show us, even if we put you on and it has happened. I have had a relative has gone to these scanners. They are scanned, their head is still aching. They are saying my head is aching. The scanner shows no unusual brain activity or anything. The science cannot show us, but that does not mean that they don't have a headache. Yeah. And I want to argue that faith in God could also be a properly basic belief. Especially, and as Christians we know, for one who has experienced, for example, the Holy Spirit, that is a properly basic belief. You know, you have experienced him. You might not even have the evidence to show people that this is what happened, but you know. And deep within your heart, you have that experience. And that's how even men in the Bible knew God. He was a dynamic will that interacted with their wills, you know. That when David says that I have seen God or I have experienced God, he might not show you in a test tube that this is what happened, but he had an experience of God. And I think in as much as evidences are good, we should not belittle the value of experience in coming to know. Wow. And so I do not think that the Christian is wrong in saying that I have experienced God and I know him. The issue will come when we are in such a table, when there is somebody who is of differing view. how can we show them that also our experience is grounded on reality? And this is where evidences can come in. And so evidences have value, and I think the Christian faith has a lot of evidences, but we are not left at the mercy of evidence. We have an experience of God, and no one can belittle that experience, whichever way you try to look at it.
Wow.
Yes.
Boris, I think that is convincing. I was actually trying to get one to pray.
You see,
Pray for you.
Yeah.
you see, that's a very good argument. Huh? Because you see, and this is something I want to demystify what he was saying about scientific evidence. There's this notion that this scientific evidence is this peer-reviewed in a journal, whatever. No, every evidence doesn't have to rise to that level. There's these simple things we call experience, as he's saying. So to give the case of his case of a headache, of course, when you're having a headache, you know you have a headache. The problem comes when it's convincing others. So the question is, you have the evidence. Should I be expected to believe your claim based on your evidence when I don't have that experience myself? Because, and this comes up to the biblical story of like Paul, my favorite character. Paul had a Damascus experience, and they say he saw God or somehow experienced God. Who should believe God? Assuming that is factual, who should believe God based on that evidence? It's Paul. Me, I don't have that Damascus experience. I've not had God or seen God or experienced God in any of what we call common sense, our five senses. I've not touched, I've not seen, I've not smelled God. So the person who has the evidence should believe. The one who doesn't have cannot be blamed for not believing. The problem is with the doctrinal Christian, the way it is set up is, I would be punished, quote unquote punished, in afterlife for not believing based on Paul's evidence. Well, I don't have that evidence myself. It has not been provided to me. The other thing I wanted to, on scientific, science does not give us the truth. Science is, it gives us the best explanation as at that moment.
Okay.
That is, it's not like a truth that, they will say, you say the atom is the smallest matter. Now they have come up with quark. Now they have something else called, I think, trinon, something semi-quark. Of course,
I don't know what else they'll come up with.
Yeah, it keeps changing.
Yeah.
It is a process. It's not a destination. It's a process of trying to find out the best explanation that we have as at now.
The best human explanation.
Yeah. And finally, I wanted to correct something that he said earlier before, that atheism is a religion. Atheism is a response to one question. Atheism is not even a morality system. It's like if I ask you, what's your tribe? You tell me you are Luo. It does not tell me whether you're a good person. It does not tell you your favorite food. It does not tell me anything else about you. That's the same case with atheism. Do you believe in God? No. It does not tell you whether I'm a good person. It does not tell you whether I believe in science. It does not tell you anything other than that I believe there is not enough evidence for God. So atheism is a response to that one question. It's not a religion or a cult or anything. Yeah.
All right.
But you seem to hinge your argument on experiential evidence. Like you go to your favorite guy, Paul, that he experienced Jesus on the way to Damascus. Yeah. So now, but the evidence that God has given us about His existence is not just experiential.
Yeah.
Is a way beyond experience. Like for instance, creation. Christians or theistic, those who believe in the God of the Bible, we know God created the heavens and the earth, which is actually another way of saying that God created everything. We also know that God created human beings and everything, animals and everything that there is in it. Now,
I like it that you started by calling it creation so that you started by calling it creation so that now you just find there is a creator, but anyway, continue.
Okay. Maybe I know that guys will think
begging the question.
Somehow it just arose. But and that's what I'm saying. As biblical believing Christians or Bible believing Christians, we believe God created the heavens and the earth. We believe and everything in it. Sure. So that's not just experiential. Evidence, but rather tangible. What you can see, you might doubt the existence of God, but you cannot doubt the existence of the earth, of the trees, of everything in it. You cannot even doubt your own existence because you are there. So we have that, what the theologians refer to as general revelation of God. But we also now, when we quote the Bible, when we refer to the Bible, we are now alluding to what theologians would call special revelation, where God himself, like when Jesus met Paul on the way to Damascus, Paul did not read about Jesus anywhere. They met him face to face. When God parted the Red Sea, it was not about something that just Moses read somewhere. He saw it. When he was told to strike a stone and water came out, it was something that people were seeing. When Jesus walked on water, it was things that people were seeing. Now, I don't want to go very much in the Old Testament because you said you don't think the characters of the Old Testament existed. Yet, in your opening remarks, you had said that the God of Abraham Isaac and Jacob, that's the God you don't like.
Yeah, that's what he's named. That's what he's named. Like there's a character called the Lannistite Game of Thrones. He doesn't. That's what we call him, but he's not a real character.
So I'm saying the God of those people in the Old Testament, you don't like him.
No,
you don't agree.
You see, I might not like you, but I cannot deny your existence.
Okay.
Liking you or not liking you has no bearing on whether you actually exist.
No.
So, of course, there are things I don't like in the Old Testament, but that has no bearing on whether there is an actual claim for God. There could be a God who exists and is not moral to my expectation. So that is, so the fact that I prove, I might say I don't like him doesn't mean him. But there's one question I also wanted to respond to her when she talks about morality in the heart. Do you think it's possible to also have that in the wrong, to get it wrong when you use like your own conscience, the way you say morality is implanted? Like in America, for 400 years, people are owning slaves. Those people had a clear conscience because owning slave then was just like keeping a cow nowadays, the way you have a cow to get milk. They had a clear conscience. That's why they actually fought for the battle with Abraham Lincoln to keep the slave. They thought they were doing the right thing. So do you think they had a bad conscience, or do you think they did it? Why did that conscience not betray them for 400 plus years? So if you use that, probably you can also get it. It shows that if you use that inner feeling, or what you would call your self-conscious, it can lead you to good things. It can also lead you to bad things. So it tells you it's not a reliable way to morality.
No, it is reliable because those people that kept slaves, they knew what they were doing was wrong. Because eventually it did not take people from outside America to come and tell them that this was wrong. They discovered they decided what you are doing is wrong, it must change.
But you see, and this is an argument, people who kept slaves and people who opposed slaves, actually both of them used the Bible to make their case. People like Martin Luther, they used the Bible to fight slavery and oppression. People who are keeping the slave, they also use the Bible to justify that we are allowed to keep slaves. They're using the Old Testament verses in Exodus. So you can use Bible to make either cases, which tells you it's not a reliable case to make a moral claim on slavery.
All right, let me make a rejoinder here, because you've raised the issue of slavery, and I hope we will not go into a wild goose chase of because we are here to discuss about God. There's a professor who's looked at the history of slavery and especially the psychology around slavery. Now, of course, you could have instances of people who owned slaves, but majority, who owned slaves and excused it, and they were okay with it. But one of the few things that he found out is, number one, that majority of slave owners who used the Bible to excuse their slave owning removed parts of the Bible and had what was called the Negro Bible.
The slave Bible.
Yes. So that Bible had parts that had been removed so that the slaves themselves could believe that the Bible wanted them to remain as slaves. Because it also turns out that those who came to know God through the Bible actually found a lot of liberation and redemption through the same Bible. So instead of actually being an argument against the Bible, what you are actually presenting is an argument for why the Bible is a better source a better source for morality than not. More importantly, and I think I have mentioned to you this in the past, you probably didn't know it is me, that the ending of slave trade, especially in Europe, and really the ending of the transatlantic slave trade really ends with Europe, with these guys who are called Wilberforce and the likes.
Yeah.
It was predominantly because of their Christian worldview that they stopped slavery. In fact, if you read biographies of Wilberforce, you will find that he stood against the grain of most people in Europe, for example, and argued because of his convictions as a Christian that the Bible actually taught and was against slave trade. And so that a wholesome understanding of the Bible actually will lead you to a position where owning of slaves is wrong. But the problem is that people want to pick and choose scripture rather than understanding the whole scripture in its entirety. So you can see it was not atheism because they are atheists. In fact, most of them were against the destruction of the ending of slave trade. But it was actually Christian convictions that led to the ending of slave trade in Europe. And the same can be said about science and other things, so that you find that the Bible seems to stand tall against all who want to oppose it in the name of that it is amoral or it is immoral. So to be fair, I think we have to appreciate that while there are difficult texts in the Bible about slavery, a proper understanding of the whole of the biblical text leads you to a position where the Bible is actually anti-slavery.
But let me clarify that. I didn't say, I'm not arguing that you cannot use Bible to do good, like in this case to fight slavery. Okay. You can perfectly look at the Bible, get proper verses that can lead you to hate slavery and fight against it. But my argument is you can also have verses that lead you to the opposite. So
I think that is what
that's what I was saying.
Being responding to, that there was an hermeneutical challenge.
Yes.
Where there are some verses. I just want to just clarifying so that you go on. Hermeneutical challenge in that some verses were removed to only leave the bit of slavery to convince the slaves that was the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's actually true. It's the slave Bible. I think I've seen some photo of it. It's in a museum. I think Lincoln Museum. So it's true. They removed the verses that talk of people are equal before God and those things, so that the slaves would not realize that. But that is true. That is a fact. And this is the point I'm repeating. You can use Bible to fight slavery. You can use Bible to fight a lot of crimes in the society. But you can, because you see now it's coming down to personal interpretation. Because if I can read a verse and go and justify to keep slave, then read another verse and justify why I should not keep slave, then it boils down to my conscience. Which verse do I, or how do I want to interpret it? So
I think this where I was disagreeing with that. Sorry for cutting you short. And I think maybe this should be a challenge to those of us who are on this side. I want to agree with you, but remember that hermeneutics, for example, is not a subjective experience. The way you do biblical interpretation.
Hermeneutics is exactly what? Is
the science of the study
interpreting.
But
is it not a subjective?
Yes, it's not a subjective. It's the way you do literature. When you used to do, say, Merchant of Venice or Animal Farm, the rules of interpreting literature are not subjective. You don't go and you ask what is the context and you say, my experience was this. There's an actual context, isn't it? There's an actual idea that the writer is communicating. And so what you are talking about is true, that people have actually misused the Bible. All we are saying, and you will find this and ask the theologians, that there is a systematic way of interpreting biblical text so that you can come out with knowing what is the biblical position on this idea. So what is the biblical position on slavery? The theologians will tell you after doing hermeneutics, this is the position. If somebody decides to use it wrongly, of course you can do that for anything. But the question is, what does the Bible actually teach?